Okay, you got a dominance hierarchy. Someone gets to the top, you admire them. Alright. But that's not exactly what human beings are like. First of all, there isn't one dominance hierarchy. There's hundreds of the bloody things, especially as society becomes complex. There's a radically variegated realm of dominance hierarchies, right? And so, then you might ask yourself, across the set of dominance hierarchies, is there a set of properties that makes people likely to get to the top? And that's the kind of question that only a creature capable of abstraction could ask or posit. And I would say that the figure that represents the properties that produces the highest probability of climbing to the top of the set of all dominance hierarchies is a messianic figure. That's what a messianic figure is. So, and it's a kind of abstraction. It says, because of course, obviously a messianic figure is an ideal, right? Clearly. And so then you might think, well, an ideal in relationship to what? Well, he generally is the perfect person. Well, how would we come up with the concept of what constitutes perfect? Think about it as a biological category. Well, there's hardly anything more perfect than the ability to climb to the top of whatever dominance hierarchy you happen to be put in. Now, one of the things I would say is that women exerted tremendous selection pressure on men to be exactly that sort of creature. So, and I can tell you a little bit of experimental evidence that we have in relationship to that later. Unfortunately, it was an unpublished study because it was an undergraduate thesis, but what the hell else would women select men for? If they had any sense. You know, you want to select a partner, because you know, you've heard the idea of hypergamy, right? Women mate across or up dominance hierarchies, and so people think, well, women are after, say, something like wealth and success. It's like, we tested that. Women aren't that stupid. So what we did was this. So we showed a bunch of women the same picture of a guy, but we attached 4 stories to it. One story was, the basic 2x2 cross was useful versus useless and poor versus rich. So we had useless poor, useful rich, useless rich, and useful poor. And so here were the stories. So the useless poor guy, well, you don't need a story for that. It's like everybody can figure out what that is. You know, he doesn't have anything and he's never going to get anything. So fine, useless and poor. Then there's useless and rich. That's a harder one, right? So what we did was, the guy had won a lottery that paid out weekly for the rest of his life. So he couldn't squander the money because it only came in weekly, so there was always going to be money around. And we made the amount sufficiently substantial so that, you know, he was in the top 1%, let's say. So that's useless rich. Then useful poor was this guy that, he worked for an NGO, and like, he was a good guy, and you know, he was helping people out, but he was never really going to make any money doing this. He was sort of altruistically committed to a benevolent cause. Useful poor. And then there was useful rich, right, which, you know, that's sort of the useful rich guy. He's like the hero of every 2-bit romance. And if you don't believe me, then you could read A Billion Wicked Thoughts. It's quite a cool book. It's written by Google Analytics guys, and they were looking for the archetypal structure of the sort of literature that women read in their spare time, so to speak, on the web. It's sort of like the female equivalent of pornography. And so the main guys in these stories are surgeon, that's a good one, billionaire, pirate, vampire, and werewolf. Yeah, so it's very funny. Anyway, so what we found was, we had the women rate the guys for, you know, would you date this guy? You know, would you go out for coffee? Would you date him? Would you consider a long-term relationship? And the result was, wealth was irrelevant. Useful was relevant. So the useful poor guy was just as good as the useful rich guy. And that, you know, that's smart. Because what you should select for isn't having stuff now. That's because maybe the stuff will go away. And that was especially true in societies where stuff couldn't be stored, which was almost every society we ever had until the modern times. So what you select for is the capability of being successful across multiple environments. Obviously. Okay, so that's very much like the capability of climbing to the dominance hierarchy across sets of dominance hierarchies. And then, you know, I talked to you about DeWaal a little bit, and I suggested that it's not so obvious what would put someone at the top. So leadership qualities, you know, because you can think about it as blunt power, sort of like psychopathic leader. But, you know, that's pretty pessimistic, and it could easily be that a leader who can maintain power for any amount of time, so in some sense isn't going to be thrown over by violent revolution, has to be a leader of a certain type. And that's stable across, let's say it's stable across eons. Or we could even say maybe it's stable across millions of years in very complex social organisms. It's a possibility. Because, you know, partly what I've been trying to get at is the biological basis of religious belief. And I would like to tell you, I'm not trying to reduce religious belief to anything. Because it's like Daniel Dennett wrote a book called Consciousness Explained. And the critic said, consciousness explained away. You know, so, and I could say, well, I'm trying to explain religious phenomenology, but I am not trying to explain it away. I'm not trying to reduce it to something else. I'm trying to account for its relationship with evolutionary structure. And, you know, this is also why I think the modern atheists are so damn clueless. It's like religion is a human universal, right? There's lots of human universals. Decoration is one. Everywhere people decorate themselves. Clothing seems to be another, roughly speaking. Some form of marriage seems to be another. Language seems to be another. Sharing food seems to be another. Like, you know, we're human, and human beings have characteristics like other animals have characteristics. And religious experience and belief of some form is also a human universal. So, you know, it's something you have to contend with from an evolutionary perspective. You can't just brush it off and say, well, it's like superstitious science. It's like, that's not an analysis. It's like human beings are religious animals. So what the hell does that mean? You know, we bury our dead with ceremonies, and we've been doing that for tens of thousands of years. So it's in us. And no one came up with these theories, because that's what the Marxists used to say, right? They said, well, religion is the opiate of the masses. It's like, yeah, Marxism was the meth of the masses, you know, so we know where that went. So, you know, and Marx's idea, and this is the same idea that the post-structuralists and the postmodernists bandy about, is that, you know, religion is some sort of semi-calculated expression of the power elite, and the purpose of it is to subordinate those who are subordinate and to keep those who are in power across time. It's like, it's a conspiracy theory. Nobody invented Christianity. You know, it's like it took 2,000 years to reach its current form, and it was based on ideas that are tens of thousands of years older than that. So nobody was sitting around thinking, well, let's whip up a system to oppress the masses. And like, even if you did come up with a theory like that, how in the world are you going to get people to buy into it? You know, it's not that easy to start a mass movement, and I think there's 2 billion Christians, something like that. How do you get all those people to be thinking that this is a good idea? It's not easy.